Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, entrepreneur and technophile Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Here I am, the golden stallion of the tech world, ready for another great episode of Sovryn Tech, as always. Got a nice, as usual, Saturday release, kind of a Saturday night release that we're doing now. So if you hadn't heard that before and you're wondering, hey, on Fridays, where is my episode? Here it is. And we've got a lot of stuff to go over today. But I'm really going to enjoy this one. Actually, this episode will be part of a double load that I do every once in a while, where you get a double load of Sovryn Tech in the same day. And so another episode will also be released in conjunction with this one. It's a special with the head of Obsolete Magazine, Rich Dana. It was a fantastic conversation, so please look for that Sovryn Tech special. It'll be coming out the same time as this episode, so if you hear this, you're going to hear that. So take a look. And anyway, let's break into the episode. Let's get right to it. But, well, you know what? Before we do, there will be another PRISM story later in the episode during Hacker Stories. Last week, I think I said that I won't do any more PRISM stories, but I'm going to try and make this one the last one. But it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of people are really, because of this whole PRISM thing, a lot of people are getting very much into privacy. And while I myself am not so much of a one for privacy, or at least I don't take it as seriously as some people do, I think it's good for people to at least be knowledgeable of what happens to the information that they publish and post and put out there. So if anything, PRISM has definitely opened a lot of eyes, to how technology actually works, and really how it's always worked. I said this in a previous episode, and I'll say it over and over again. I'll say it on Free Talk Live. I'll say it anywhere I am. That the notion of privacy, not necessarily the idea of anonymity, there is a difference, but the idea of privacy, that's something that you create or write down, or, whatever, has died since the implementation of the digital world, of digital information, of digital technology, and to kind of prove my point, okay, here's an article from Mashable. It's our opening story. And I caught this on Twitter. I woke up one morning and I saw this on Twitter and I go, what? I thought it was some kind of hipster thing, but not at all. This is deadly serious, and we'll see how serious this is. But it's an interesting idea, and it's the typewriter is back to save privacy. The typewriter is back. Now, there's people out there. Let's make no mistake. There are people out there that still use the typewriter and refuse to use the computer, but we can talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. So let's get right into the story from Mashable. You know how to make sure a government agency, or if you are a government agency, then say WikiLeaks, won't eventually read everything you type? By dumping your laptop and clacking the keys on something like an old-fashioned Selectric, then hand-delivering the result to your correspondent. That appears to be the rationale behind the Russian government's decision to purchase new typewriter equipment. The country's Federal Guard agency has placed an order for 486,000 rubles worth of electric typewriters, according to the Russian Procurement Service website. Granted, that's only about $15,000 worth, an estimated 20 typewriters, but this is just one order. More important is the revelation given by a source at the agency to Russia's Izvestia newspaper. The Defense Ministry, the Emergencies Ministry, and the Special Services are already creating documents on non-electronic devices. President Putin is already receiving some of his correspondence this way, Izvestia said. After scandals with the distribution of secret documents by WikiLeaks and the exposés by Edward Snowden, the anonymous source explained, it has been decided to expand the practice of creating paper documents, especially because each document can be traced back to its unique typewriter signature. Now, wait a minute. What is going on with all of this? Isn't everybody like, yeah, we're going green, we're going to that paperless society where, we're pushing all the integrating everything's going to be on servers, all your medical information, blah blah blah, all that stuff. Now we're going back? Or at least Russia is. So, will typewriters become a trend among the privacy obsessed? They certainly have hipster appeal. A number of Brooklyn-based writers raved about them to the New York Times a few years back. Users love the fact that it forces you to commit to your thoughts without relying on the delete key, as well as the fact that you need never run out of power for want of a wall outlet. Add in the clandestine correspondence factor, and typewriters might as well be dubbed the new vinyl. Reports that the world's last typewriter factory closed its doors a few years ago turned out to be false. There is still a thriving trade in these ink-making machines, though most of it is in the developing world. I had heard that's kind of true, and I think it was Olympia that actually did close its doors. And so for a lot of the professional world, when Olympia closed its doors as far as or Olympics, when that typewriter company pretty much shut down, that was the end. That like essentially for so many people. In fact, some people I know, in particular, my personal favorite author Harlan Ellison, his basement looks like a munitions dump because it's just loaded with typewriter equipment and ribbons and freezers. They put the ribbons in freezers that way, they hold their ink and they last. And so, yeah, I mean, like the idea that typewriters were no longer being produced was certainly, an idea that was definitely pushed around. I'm glad to hear it's not true. But that is interesting. So, but again, I mean, there are people who still want to use this, and it doesn't have to do with privacy. It's not just privacy. And I'm glad that this article pointed that out, that there's some people who like it, just for the fact that, you can't delete, you have to commit to what you wrote and you have to keep going with it. And maybe sometimes that's how some of the best pieces of fiction have graced this world. Also, Harlan Ellison himself will say that he never used a computer because he, with a typewriter, what he wrote was real. It existed in the world, as in like it was something that you could touch and it couldn't really go away. And I think that's an interesting concept, even though that doesn't have anything to do with privacy. We'll keep going with the article. Would you switch to a typewriter for any reason? Let us know in the comments. And if you're wondering what kind of typewriters the Russians favor, the agency order apparently included ribbons for the Triumph All-New TWEN 180, recommended for confidential documents, according to Izvestia. Order yours today. So this article will be in the show notes, and there's links within the article talking, discussing various things about the typewriter, because obviously at one point in time, the typewriter was a really big deal in society, because, I mean, that's how information was getting, passed around. If it wasn't in, at the news agency, like the Daily Planet, but I'm just kidding. I assume most people know the Daily Planet isn't a real newspaper. But amazingly, they still push newspapers in the comic books, which is maybe harder to believe than the existence of Superman. But anyway, so, via newspapers or government documents getting sent around, or in courtrooms, or, just office memos, at various companies. I mean, the typewriter was very much a mainstay of Western society for a long time. I mean, for, good 100 years, if not longer. And so it's interesting that this technology, and this sort of thing seems to happen a lot. I mean, we can get into the privacy aspects of it because that's mainly what this is about, but it's interesting that this sort of thing happens. And I'm kind of, how to put this, like you take texting, okay? The idea of texting somebody with your smartphone or cell phone. And when you do that, how different is that from sending a Western Union 120 years ago? It's not that different. It's text, or like however long ago, before the phone, before the actual like call, hear my voice phone, was released by accredited to Alexander Graham Bell. He really wasn't the official guy, or he's the official guy, but he wasn't really the creator. But anyway, it's like, well, it took 100 years, but guess what? Texting is back. Sending stuff, telemetrically over a wire is back in fashion, back in vogue. And why do people like texting? Why is texting so popular? Well, I mean, there's a lot of different answers on that, but I think the number one reason, whether people realize it or not, is because when you text somebody, you can respond at your leisure. You don't have to pick up the phone. You're not in real time per se. You don't have to like give a person an answer right away. You can chew on what was said and you can send it out. Not to say that texting is like the penultimate of communicating. It's not, because you lose inflection, you lose so many things when you're, as compared to when you actually talk to somebody. But there are significant advantages, in my opinion, to texting. I prefer texts over calling on the phone. In fact, I hear that most technologists, that I'm aware of, even like Dvorak or Leo Laporte or whoever, they all say the same thing. But don't call me. Send me a text. I don't want to talk. And I can understand that, and I feel the same way. Send me a text, send me a message, and I'll get back in touch. But again, yeah, it's interesting that it seems like there are certain ideas, certain ways of things getting done that even when it seems like they die off, they sort of just come back. Equally. There was a recent story that Apple in, I think, Russia and Japan, they patented the iWatch, or at least they trademarked the name or whatever. And so the watch is going to come back, and there's been other tech journalists who've talked about that. We actually talked about it on this show at one point, but also Mike Elgin has talked about it quite a bit. But I mean, now granted, the reason the watch is coming back is because these technology companies need to come up with something new to get people to buy new products. It actually I don't think it has anything really to do with the practicality of a watch. But then, I mean, what a watch does has never gone away. That's the reason why watches have gone away, is because now people can just check their time on their cell phone, and they want to look at their cell phone anyway, to see if there's any notifications or whatever. So, the idea of having a timepiece in whatever form doesn't seem to go away. Just like here, the way of communicating, in this case securely, even though it seemed like, yeah, digital, that's so much easier, we're going to save trees and, we're going to do all this, it's not going away, it's coming back. And I don't know if this is going to come back in America, because America, especially when you take under consideration things like PRISM, in America, the United States controls all the keys as far as digital communications goes. They hold all the, they're the gatekeepers and they hold all the keys. Besides various hackers that essentially lockpick the system, which is an apt analogy, because hackers are generally good at lockpicking as well. So I don't see typewriters coming back in America, but I wonder how many countries around the world are going to start buying typewriters again. It's going to be a burgeoning business. Burgeoning business. I recommend, if you want to look for, okay, what's a good thing to maybe throw some money at, look into typewriter companies or start your own. Because this might be a really big deal, and don't plan on making the money in the United States unless it's with, like privacy advocates, or privacy activists, which I guess there are, but that's happening. That's going to happen big time. Now, granted, I don't like the fact that these typewriters, or, whatever, the government loves it, but, the fact that, like, you can trace where these documents, what typewriter these documents had come from. Now, this is commonplace practice. That's not something new. Typewriters, they've been able to do that with typewriters for a very long time. It's very similar to what they do with computer printers. Computer printers, and you can barely see it, if you can even see it at all. With a paper that comes out, there's like coding on the paper, essentially, not on the paper, but that gets there's a little bit that gets printed out to where they can tell you, especially this is popular on laser printers, to where they know exactly what time this piece of paper was printed, what printer it was printed from, what's the IP address of what it's printed on, etc., etc. All that information is on the page, and you just don't know it. So that's not anything new. They've been doing that for 60, 70 years. But anyway, that's unfortunate. So, I mean, you could look into, does the typewriter, if you wanted to do this for yourself, you wanted some privacy, and that's fine if you do. I can, especially with more and more of these, revelations coming out of guys like Edward Snowden and who knows who else, as more and more of them are confirmed. Again, a lot of people have already known this stuff exists, but as more are confirmed, maybe this is something you want to look into, is getting a typewriter. But look into see if it's a typewriter that doesn't track, what typewriter it came from. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking to, to grab some of these devices. Something else to consider, and I've seen some people in the Liberty movement with this. They'll have, I have one, but I don't use it because of privacy purposes. But there's those, they're like moleskin notebooks. They're these little notebooks. They're kind of advertised as the notebook that Hemingway used. And they were pretty popular, over 100 years ago. And they're these nice, really, leather bound. They can be had for around $10. Probably off brands could be had for significantly cheaper. And you can write stuff down in them, and you can tear out the pages. All the pages are perforated, so you can hand over a note or something, or you can write a nice love letter to a partner or something like that. And that is a way to maybe communicate with each other, that is private, because again, there's no digital communications, it seems, that just can't be tracked, that can't be traced, or perhaps even that can't be unencrypted. I know there's people out there that disagree with me, but look, quantum computing is going to break every form of encryption we have. Okay. Just and disagree with me, that's fine, and you can send me the papers that say no, that's not going to happen. But I think on both ends we're kind of in the realm of the theoretical, and if we're in the realm of the theoretical on my end of the game, quantum computing will break every form of encryption the world knows. Anyway, so, and something else too, it's interesting that this comes out, that this article comes out, and I do feel, and I mentioned this on the Google Plus page, and if you want to see, you can go to gplus.to/Brian Sovryn. It's my personal Google Plus page, and you are welcome to communicate with me there. You can even message me on Hangouts or whatever, that's fine. But you are welcome to connect with me there. And I don't know, like this kind of excited me that typewriters were coming back, or whatever. Something I've been looking to recently, a product I've been looking into, and I'll do a review of it if and when I get one. And of course, any of my listeners are welcome to send me some of these things if you want me to review something, and I'll give it a shot. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. But anyway, I think it's called the Neo. And it has nothing to do with the Matrix character. But it's just a little electronic word processor. It doesn't have a web browser on it. It doesn't have it. All it does, it's just, one of those old puke green LCD screens. And and you can type, and you can type away on it. It's a full-size keyboard, and it's got that nice little screen on it. It has like a built-in dictionary, I suppose. These kind of things were really popular at like Radio Shack in the 90s. And I had an older model of them, and it was really great. I mean, the thing would kind of last forever on battery life, because back then, they used to care about battery life. Now people don't seem to care at all. It's one of my main problems with Google, is that Google doesn't seem very concerned with any of the hardware they release. They do not seem very concerned with battery life. And I don't get it. They just think you're always going to be near a wall outlet or something. But anyway, I've been looking at this thing, and it's called the Neo. It's a still a brand new model. They're still newly produced, and it runs on 3 AA batteries. They also have a rechargeable battery that you can put into it. But on 3 AA batteries, it lasts like 700 hours. I mean, it's crazy how long you could type on that. And it's also attractive because when you're typing on it, that's all you're doing. You're just typing on it. And you're not surfing the web. You're not, watching something while you do it. Though I guess you could still do that if you had a TV. I don't, but anyway. But I mean, you're concentrated on the writing, and that's exciting. So I've been looking into one of those. I've been really wanting one, just to see what that's like, and to get that 700-hour battery life to write something. Oh man, that's exciting. But anyway, it's interesting that people are it looks like people are reassessing. It's interesting and exciting. And I think this is what excites me about this story, is that people are reassessing these technologies that really were around for over a century. And saying, no, you know what? Maybe we actually came up with the best thing already for this job. Maybe this newfangled thing is just that. It's newfangled, and it doesn't actually give us anything extra. Not to say that I'm saying, don't use computer. I mean, come on, I'm running a tech podcast here. I'm not saying that at all. But it's interesting, and this is something I'm reminded of the game. It's a great game by EA, which isn't a great company, but a great game called Mirror's Edge, where it's kind of a parkour first-person shooter, though what I love about it is you actually don't ever have to shoot anybody. And in that, you are a messenger. And you essentially, because everything, it takes place in the future, and because everything is so watched, so, big brothered, that you play a character that actually delivers handwritten or typed out papers to other groups, to different factions. And it's interesting because it looks like that future seems to be happening now. So anyway, check it out in the show notes. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be right back with more.
Once upon a time, long before the dawn of digital technology and social media, analog dinosaurs roamed the earth. Free thinkers relied on underground newspapers to spread their radical ideas. If you thought that underground newspapers were extinct, pick up a copy of Obsolete magazine from Obsolete Press. Each issue of this old-school newsprint tabloid is packed with original DIY articles, counterculture essays, science fiction stories, and artwork by a list of international contributors who are dedicated to smashing the status quo. Obsolete magazine is available from obsolete-press.com, and Obsolete Press offers special discounts to readers who use Bitcoin. Until August 11th, Obsolete Press is running a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign. If you like what you read and want to pledge, look for the link at obsolete-press.com. Social media is great, but Obsolete offers a reading experience unlike anything on the web. The underground newspaper is alive and well. Read Obsolete and get your hands dirty. Tech Roulette. Want to play?
Oh, it is time for Tech Roulette, and I want to play. I always want to play. I think I say that every time. Maybe I don't, but I get the sense that I do say I always want to play. Anyway, hope you want to play too, and actually quite a few of you do. I get lots of listener submissions of stories that I end up eeny, meeny, miny, mowing. That's all what Tech Roulette's about, is just, stories I get from listeners, and then I choose which one I find the most interesting, or I literally do eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Whatever I end up on, I decide to talk about. Unless, I guess, if it's something I really, couldn't talk about, which wouldn't be very many topics, because I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, then I suppose I would, pick a different one. But anyway, if it's something I could talk about, then I choose it and I run with it. This is a great, what we've got this week for Tech Roulette it's kind of a classic. This is an open letter that was published on the internet, May 8th, 2005. And it's a person who's a transhumanist. Transhumanist, if you don't know, is somebody who is attempting to get past death, and get past this mortal body, and, through science, not through supernaturalism. And so this is a response to a transhumanist's 19-year-old brother dying. And it's pretty poignant stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we can talk about it a little bit, maybe, if we have time. The day is May 8th, 6 months and 1 week after the final annihilation of Yehuda Natan Yudkowsky. Today I am going to visit my little brother's grave with my family to watch the unveiling of his matzeva, the stone that is set in the ground to mark his grave. Obviously, the person that died is Jewish. This is a warm day in Chicago, springtime, with trees blossoming, and a bright blue cloudless sky. Nature does not mark the passing of our dead. We drive for an hour and arrive at the cemetery. The last time I was here for my brother's funeral, I choked up when I saw a sign with an arrow to direct cars bearing the hand-lettered name Yudkowsky. This time there is no sign for Yehuda or anyone. There is no funeral in this graveyard today. There is only one cemetery employee with a map to direct the visitors to graves. We drive to an unremarkable section of the cemetery. The last time I was here, there was a great crowd to mark this place and a tent for the mourners and rows of chairs. This time there is only grass and metal plates set into the grass. I could not have found this place from memory. I look around for landmarks, trying to remember the location. I remember, I will never forget, when I came to the cemetery for my brother's funeral. I remember getting out of the car and walking toward a van. I looked inside the van and saw my brother's polished wooden coffin. The box seemed so small. I didn't see how my brother could fit in there. "What are you doing here, Yehuda?" I said to the coffin. "You're not supposed to be here." My grandfather, my Zaddy, came toward me then and held me. I remember, I will never forget, the phone call I got in Atlanta. My cell phone screen identified the calling number, my parents' house. I said hello, and my Aunt Rena and Ela, and I knew that something was wrong. Hearing Aunt Rena's voice on my phone line, I remember having time to wonder what had happened and even who had died before she said, "Your brother Yehuda is dead. You need to come home right away." That was the previous time. I don't feel today what I felt then. There's a script built into the human mind. We grieve and then stop grieving and go on with our lives until the day we get another phone call. Probably one of my grandparents will be next. I walk along the gravel path that leads to where my family is gathering. Looking down at the metal plates set down by the side of the path. Rosenthal, Bernard. Some plates are only names and dates. Others bear inscriptions that read loving husband, father and grandfather, or loving wife and sister. As I walk along the path, I see a plate saying only Herschel, my love, and that is when my tears start. I can imagine the woman who wrote that inscription. I can imagine what Herschel meant to her. I can imagine her life without him. How dare the world do this to us? How dare people let it pass unchallenged? I stand by the foot of my little brother's grave as my relatives read Tehillim and their prayer books. The first time I came to the cemetery, I cried from sadness. Now I cry from anger. I look around and there are no tears on my mother's face, father's face, uncles' and grandparents' faces. My mother puts a comforting hand on my shoulder, but there is no wetness on her face. Such a strange thing that I'm the only one crying. Tears of sadness we all had shed, but tears of anger are mine alone. My relatives are not permitted to feel what I feel. They attribute this darkness to God. Religion does not forbid my relatives to experience sadness and pain, sorrow and grief at the hands of their deified abuser. It only forbids them to fight back. I stand there, and instead of reciting Tehillim, I look at the outline on the grass of my little brother's grave. Beneath this thin rectangle in the dirt lies my brother's coffin, and within that coffin lie his bones, and perhaps decaying flesh if any remains. There is nothing here or anywhere of my little brother's self. His brain's information is destroyed. Yehuda wasn't signed up for cryonics, and his body wasn't identified until 3 days later. But freezing could have been, should have been, standard procedure for anonymous patients. The hospital that should have removed Yehuda's head when his heart stopped beating and preserved him in liquid nitrogen to await rescue instead laid him out on a slab. Why is the human species still doing this? Why do we still bury our dead? We have all the information we need in order to know better. Through the ages, humanity has suffered. Though the ages, we have lost our dead forever. And then one day, someone invented an alternative, and no one cared. The cryonicists challenged death, and no one remarks on it. The first freezing should have been front-page news in every newspaper of every country. Would have been front-page news for any sane, intelligent species. Someday afterward, humankind will look back and realize that we could have done, should have done, if only we had done. Then there will be a great wailing and gnashing of teeth. Too late, all too late. People heard about Ted Williams on the news and laughed for 10 seconds, and in those 10 seconds they lost their husbands, their wives, their mothers, their children, their brothers. It's not fair that they should lose so much in so little time without anyone telling them the decision is important. I did talk to my family about cryonics. They gave me a weird look, as expected, and chose to commit suicide as expected. It is a Jewish custom not to walk upon the graves of the dead. I am standing in a path between two lines of graves. Some of my relatives, my uncle David and his children, are standing in the space next to Yehuda's grave, where another grave will someday go. I think that if a filled grave is ominous, so too is land earmarked for a grave in the cemetery, like standing above a hungry mouth waiting to be filled. When will we stop feeding our cemeteries? When will we stop pretending that this is fair? When will the human species stop running and at last turn to stand at bay to face full on the enemy and start fighting back? Last Friday night, my grandmother spoke to us about an exhibit she had seen on Chiun Sugihara, sometimes called the Japanese Schindler, though Sugihara saved 5 to 10 times as many people as Oskar Schindler. Chiun Sugihara was the Japanese consul assigned to Lithuania. Against the explicit orders of his superiors, Sugihara issued more than 2,139 transit visas to refugees from the approaching German armies. Each visa could grant passage rights to an entire family. Yad Vashem in Israel estimates that Sugihara saved between 6,000 and 12,000 lives. If there had been 2,000 consuls like Chiun Sugihara, says the homepage of the Sugihara Project, 1 million Jewish children could have been saved from the ovens of Auschwitz. Why weren't there 2,000 consuls like Sugihara? That, too, is one of the questions asked after the end of World War II, when the full horror of Nazi Germany was known and understood and acknowledged by all. We remember the few resistors, and we are proud. I am glad to be a member of the species that produced Sugihara, even as I am ashamed to be a member of the species that produced Hitler. But why were there so few resistors, and why did so many people remain silent? That was the most perplexing question of all in the years after World War II. Why did so many good and decent people remain silent? For his shining crime, Sugihara was fired from the Japanese Foreign Ministry after the war ended. Sugihara lived the next 2 decades in poverty until he was found by one of the people he had helped save and brought to Israel to be honored. Human beings resisted the Nazis at the risk of their lives and at the cost of their lives. To resist the greatest enemy costs less, and yet the resistors are fewer. It is harder for humans to see a great evil when it carries no gun and shouts no slogans, but I think the resistors will also be remembered someday if any survive these days. My relatives, good and decent people, finish reciting their prayers of silence. my mother and father uncover the grave plaque. It shows 2 lions. Lions are associated with the name Yehuda, and a crown and an inscription which translates as the crown of a good name. 2 of my uncles give 2 brief speeches, of which I remember only these words. How does one make with the peace with the loss, or how does one make peace with the loss of a son, a nephew, a grandchild? You do not make peace with darkness. You do not make peace with Nazi Germany. You do not make peace with death. It is customary to place small stones on the grave plaque to show that someone was there. Each night the groundskeepers sweep away the stones. It is a transient symbol. One by one my relatives come forward and lay their stones in silence. I wait until all the rest have done this and most people have departed and the rest are talking to one another. Then I draw my finger across the grass, tearing some of it, gathering dirt beneath my fingernails. I can still see a tinge of dirt now under my nails as I write this. And then I hammer my stone into the dirt, hoping it will stay there permanently. I do this in silence without comment, and no one asks why. Perhaps that is well enough. I don't think my relatives would understand if I told them that I was drawing a line in the graveyard. In the name of Yehuda, who is dead but not forgotten, love, Eliezer. Whoa. I mean, if you feel speechless after that, I most certainly do. And it's true. How dare people think that death is normal or okay? It's neither. Is it natural based on organic symptoms? Okay, fine. That doesn't mean it has to be normal. It's something we can beat. It's something he just like Eliezer did, he essentially drew a line in the sand at the end. He was saying to death, it's like, no, look, I'm taking you head on. Fuck you. Powerful stuff. It reminds me very much, I know I mention him a lot on this show, but it reminds me very much, there's a collection of short stories that Harlan Ellison does. It's called Angry Candy. And in the beginning of that, he talks very similar to this, where he's talking about a lot of these great science fiction authors, genuinely great minds. Not that one's, intelligence has any, bearing in whether or not they should die, in my opinion. But he's talking about Ted Sturgeon, all these different guys that have come and gone and died, all these people that he knew that have died, just these tremendous people and who even I can say, in their words that have continued on, in their books and their stories, just great minds that I would love to meet and to talk to and to pick, even just be able to pick their brains. And they're gone. And for people to say, well, they're in heaven now. No, that's not good enough. They're gone. I can't talk to them. I can't experience them. I can't be with them. What the hell? And how dare people say, well, if we live forever, life would be boring. Bullshit. You have no idea. If that's true, then your God has got to be the most boring person ever because he's apparently been around forever. No. And I agree. Death is the ultimate enemy. It really is. I mean, not that I care much for enemy imagery by any means, but it seems to fit the bill right now. And it needs to go away. When death goes away, believe me, the state will lose all power. It'll be gone because then the gun doesn't matter. Then all this crap, it just doesn't matter. When we start healing this stuff, let's start working on this. Let's stop putting our money into other ways or into violent means of reacting to violent organizations, and let's put our money into little groups with big minds that could figure this stuff out and finally eliminate the idea that we have to die. I don't trust a robot body. Well, I don't trust everybody else with my body the way it is now. I'll take that robot body, and I'll take my chances. Because what, I mean, isn't that what we're always told? That, well, we got to be afraid of death. We got to be, they might come and hurt us. They've got the guns. Well, when you got a robot body, guess what? Those guns don't mean anything. Forget it. So why don't we start pushing for that? Why don't we start looking at that as a solution? Let's start coming up with just the most crazy and wildest ideas. I totally agree with Eliezer here, saying that why isn't freezing a brain standard operation? Not that I want there to be a law. But I agree. Fine, let's put it in nitrogen. Well, we don't know that works. It's better than putting somebody in a wooden box that does nothing. In fact, I agree. That's something else. What the hell's the point to a coffin and all that stuff anyway? I mean, even I know atheists still do it. For what? I mean, either go ahead and spread the ashes, dump the body in the ocean, or just make it easier for the worms to get some food. Why the wooden box? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's such a crazy holdover. I mean, what are we all pharaohs that we deserve to be? And not the pharaohs deserved it either. That we deserve to be, put into some kind of coffin and our bodies somehow memorialized for some kind of spiritual transit? No, obviously not. And this is something, this is such a fundamental thing. And this is where a lot of people, here's something that listeners might find strange. But I seriously question the very notion of rights, be they natural or not. I question it. And it seems too often, especially in libertarian circles, or not even just libertarian circles, in any thinking circle, that it's just accepted as, okay, yeah, that's how it is. Maybe not. Let's ask those deep questions. What is the point to all this funeral stuff? Why do we have to accept that somehow, hey, death and taxes are the only two things that are inevitable? No, we as libertarians, as anarchists, are saying taxes are not inevitable, so why don't we start saying death isn't inevitable either? Now that's exciting. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
Wow! It's a website of the week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I cover websites that I find particularly interesting. This week we got something a little bit different. This isn't actually like a specific .com or .net that I'm sharing with you. This is from TechCrunch, and it's a web page. It's linked to in the show notes. You may have heard news in the past couple weeks. Again, we're in July of 2013. That AT&T is going to be selling your browsing history, location, and more to advertisers. Verizon does it. I mean, pretty much every cell phone company does it. So if you're thinking, oh, well, my company isn't so bad. No, they're that bad. They all are. So, I mean, the only thing you can expect by switching carriers is maybe you can get a superior phone, or maybe you can get a superior price or something like that. But as far as expectations of somehow getting privacy of some kind, no, sorry. At least in the United States, pretty much all of them just don't care, and they'll hand over your information at the drop of a hat. So anyway, this page, what it does is, and again, it's in the show notes. You can check it out. It would, there's no way I could read off this URL. But what this page will do is it shows you where to go, and it gives you the links, because you can actually go to AT&T's website, you can go to Verizon's website, you can go to Sprint's website, you can go to T-Mobile's website. It doesn't have US Cellular here or any of those other guys, but you can go to any of those. It gives you the links to go to those websites so that you can say, no, I do not want my information being sold to advertisers. This is something that Google's really good about. Google will actually, they give you opt-out cookies out of their stuff. They give you options in pretty much anything that you can click that'll say, okay, no, I don't want any personalized ads. I don't want my information going out. I don't want this, to help out advertisers. And not that I necessarily have a problem with advertisers. I mean, I really don't have a problem with advertisers. It's part of my my quote-unquote day job, but I do understand where people have a real problem with ads or with the idea of their information going out to third parties when they're you see, here's the thing, like, okay, fine, so Google sends out all this information. Why aren't you mad at Google? Google gives you their services for free. This is how it gets paid for. But as far as like I use Sprint, or if you're using AT&T, like this web page is mainly about, you're paying a premium. Don't just send out my information, okay? I'm paying you so that you don't do that, but instead they're just going to send it out anyway. So anyway, at least they give you the option to opt out of these things, and you can check out, again, it's in the show notes, or you can go to sovryntech.com or soundcloud.com/sovryntech. You can find the link there. It's the link right next to the story with this headline, or with the section that says website of the week. There's a link underneath that, and you can click on that, and it'll show you. Gives you the links and who to even call, because actually with Verizon you have to call Verizon. You can't just do it online. With Sprint you can do it online, and with AT&T you can do it online. But with Verizon, nope. Get on your phone, and tell them, no, please do not send out my information. And yes, Verizon's already been doing it forever. It's ridiculous because again, AT&T is just like, well, hey, Verizon's doing it. We'll do it too. We'd like a piece of that pie. And it's like, okay, just because one company does it, suddenly that makes everything okay? No, of course it doesn't. So anyway, you can check this out in the show notes. I thought it was just something very handy for my listeners to have. I know a lot of them are big on privacy, and this is something that's important to them. So check it out. Again, it'll be in the show notes, sovryntech.com, and I'll be right back with more.
Now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
In my book on sex, I've written a fairly extensive chapter about sex during pregnancy. Well, the short of it is that unless a woman has a specific medical reason that makes sex during pregnancy a concern, it's okay for the vast majority of couples to get it on while mini-you is in the oven. However, I recently read a study that found that the couples who were aware that they were pregnant were having less sex than the couples who weren't aware that they were pregnant. So the authors concluded that being aware that you're pregnant causes couples to throttle back on the amount of sex that they're having. Well, unfortunately, I've got all kinds of problems with the way this study was put together, and I think there are other explanations for the findings. Plus, it was done in another country with a very different culture than that of North America. So it's helpful to remember that just because a study gets published doesn't mean we need to believe it. On the other hand, this is a good reminder for me to tell you that I've not ever seen a study that said that a pregnant couple needs to decrease the amount of sex that they would like to have unless there's a specific medical reason not to, or if the woman just doesn't feel like it due to pregnancy-related discomfort. If you have any concerns about sex during pregnancy, be sure to consult with your healthcare provider.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
It is time for listener emails, where I cover the emails you send me with questions, all kinds of things, anything. And you can literally ask me anything. You can email me, sovryntech@hush.ai. You can get in touch with me through the Google Plus page. It's g+.to/Brian Sovryn. There's just, any way you want to get in touch with me, even on sovryntech.com, there's links on the right side to where you can send me stories or to where you can even ask me a question. And keep those questions coming. I have plenty still yet to go through, and I kind of, just like Tech Roulette, I sort of eeny, meeny, miny, mo these things, unless I consider them, very, very important. And this is one that I I do consider very, very important. This was through the Google Plus page. I've kind of addressed this before in a previous episode because I got an email in the past, I believe, from a Mormon woman who was she was kind of distraught at the really sardonic and insulting tone that I can take towards religion and supernaturalism, on this show. And it comes out at times, definitely. And I feel I have perhaps a lot of justifications for those, and that's why I allow them to kind of stay in the show or whatever. But anyway, let me read this. This is from the Google Plus page that this was posted, and I really want to appreciate the messenger, the listener who sent this. I really appreciate him, taking the time to give me, to tell me, how he felt. And here we go. We'll start reading it. I'll start with saying that, for the most part, I love your show. I've listened to the last 10 or so casts and specials. I am a liberty lover. I just want to be left alone, and therefore, following the golden rule, I leave others alone. Having said that, during every episode, I wait for the inevitable shot at beliefs I hold dear. I am a Christian. I believe in the divine. I believe that there is something beyond this existence. The sum of my beliefs is very different from that of others. I am an individual and have had different life experiences. Some of my beliefs would be very welcome in most Christian churches. Some of my beliefs would not be so welcome. I also understand that there are others who do not share these beliefs. I could be wrong. They could be wrong. I understand that Christianity, along with nearly every other religion, has used the violence of the state to tyrannize and oppress. I also understand that this use of violence is completely against the teachings of the man Christians claim to follow. I feel that too many in the liberty community, while railing against collectivism, are all too eager to collectivize those who have differing opinions and beliefs. There are many people of varying beliefs in this community. We all share some common ideas and goals. Among these ideas and goals is the notion that each person should be free to choose that which most benefits him or her, so long as there is no harmful effect on others. As Wiccans put it, if it harms none, do as you will. The frequent attacks on spiritual beliefs have the effect of driving away many who would otherwise be more than willing to live and let live. These attacks make those of faith feel unwelcome in a community that is built on the supposition of freedom of choice. Again, I love the show. I love the information. Keep up the good work. Peace. And again, listener, I am very, very glad that you enjoy the show. I really, really am. I will say, and if you heard last week's episode where we got an email from Hannah Hoffman about libertinism, and I mentioned how many of the things that I say and do are reactions to social conservatism. Now, why am I reacting to social conservatism in such a way? That's because I was one. I feel that I was duped into being one, to where I don't think social conservatism is any kind of natural thing. Like as in that's how it should be. And so, I'm reacting to oppression that I had in my own life. If you can understand what I'm saying there. And, I was a Christian. I was raised Jewish. And at one point in my life, when I was around 13, 14, suddenly my parents converted to Christianity. They converted to Seventh-day Adventism. And it was just like instantaneous. It wasn't even, this is how to explain this. When you're raised Jewish, you're told the cross is essentially evil, okay? And then to suddenly be taken to a building on a Saturday, because they're Seventh-day Adventists, so they still worshipped on Shabbat, to be taken to a building filled with crosses is so terrifying to a young person. No, really, maybe to anybody. But it was so terrifying to just suddenly be surrounded by these things and to hear people praying to Yeshua, to Jesus. I was just, I mean, it's a mind fuck. You're like, what am I doing here? I mean, you think, you can only think you must have done something wrong because you're being fed to the wolves, the quote unquote Christians at the time. But then you become but then you find out, no, actually you're one of us, which is just crazy. But anyway, so I was a Christian at that point. I became an atheist when I was around 17, 18, something like that. And later on, when I joined the military, when I got out of the military, during my time in the military, and later as I got out more so, I became a Christian again. And it ended up in me making some incredibly terrible, debilitative decisions for my life and for my happiness, that, and I definitely blame Christianity, because Christianity was the thing. I was in a marriage, that was abusive. It was terrible. I was in a family situation that if I explain, I know people always say this kind of thing, but no, really, if I told you about it, you wouldn't believe it. But it's absolutely true that there's certain people that exist in this world that are like that. And I wasn't telling myself to stay in that situation. The Bible was telling me I should stay in that situation. Religion was saying that I had to stay there. Okay. I was telling myself, you need to leave. You need to get out of here. This is terrible. No one deserves this. You need to get out of here. And but I wouldn't, because it's my Christian duty to care about this person and that person, and to, their family. You must take care of family, etc. Which is just garbage. Your duty is to be happy, not in the next life, right now. So anyway, so that's where, so you can understand where some of my, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But you can understand where my vehemence comes from, for religion in that regard. I fully understand, and if I haven't proven it yet, and I'm not patting myself in the back for this, if I haven't proven it yet on this show, please understand when I say this, because I know there's people that say this too, and really it's just not true about them. But I am exceptionally well versed in comparative religions and the Bible especially. I quote chapter and verse a lot, including the weird stuff. And, so I understand that there's Christians out there that think sex is perfectly fine, and that it's like even something to be celebrated. I understand that there's Christians who think that, the human body is God's creation, so let's enjoy it. Even in Judaism, there's a specific prayer that you can say, which is a prayer of thanks for the beauty of a woman. I understand there's Christians that think, doing drugs is okay, that all this stuff, I get the people that retranslate Romans 9, they call themselves carnal Christians, that's saying that having a good time in life is, that's okay. I know that there's all these different beliefs, but that's what makes it so tough. Okay. Now I can change it to where I say, fundamentalist Christians, that I'm just attacking them. But really what it all comes down to for me, and why, because it goes beyond the oppression, the personal oppression that I experienced in my life. And that's something I have to work on and not get over, but I at least have to internalize it, so that I'm not reacting to it anymore, but just to where I'm acting within my own impulses. That's a point I need to get to. So, and you make a couple, the emailer, I'll call him, the emailer makes a couple of great points, in that, you want to, aren't we supposed to let people live and let live? Yes, absolutely. Live and let live. I don't care what people believe in, or should I say, that's not true. I do care what people believe in. I support your freedom to believe what you want. Okay. I fully support that. And somehow maybe I can make that message a little more clear. But I am very, very trepidatious, and I am admittedly very concerned. And I've actually called in. I mean, I'm a co-host on Free Talk Live, but I've actually called in to Free Talk Live about this, saying that, you know, in particularly the Abrahamic religions, how can I trust someone that essentially, if Jesus or Muhammad or the Mahdi, you know, whatever you believe as far as Islam goes, or if the coming Messiah in Judaism, whoever they are, whoever the guy is in charge that you're supposed to listen to, that's your savior, okay, if they told you, this person works for the devil, you know, or is evil or whatever, I need you to take him out. In the Bible, in the Quran, in the Tanakh, you take your pick, these cases occur, and the person goes and does it. I cannot help but be very afraid, and at times, clearly, you know, I'll be insulting, of anything that teaches that's okay, that's necessary. No, it is not. In fact, you know, I mean, I was, you know, and this is okay. If you are a Christian, you are a Christian. I have friends that are Christians, and they know how I feel. And usually they stay right away from it. They don't even talk about the subject because I can make the logical case with them. They don't even try to save me anymore because, you know, they know I know. Okay. But my point is that if you heard earlier in the show, and again, thank you so much for listening, and please continue to do so, okay, if you wish to, because there is a lot of great information in this show. But like I mentioned earlier, in that, while talking about that open letter by a transhumanist whose young brother died, to give people for supernatural belief religions, to give people so little evidence to run on that they're going to see their loved ones again, and to expect people to want to do things out of love, and whether they admit it or not, out of out of some self-interest, maybe not enlightened self-interest, but perhaps buried self-interest. That's messed up. To let people die, but to give them no real assurance that everything's going to be fine. And also, real quick, the golden rule was actually said by Publius Cyrus 100 years before Jesus was born. So just putting that out there. But thank you for the email. I'll be back with more. This is Brian Sovryn.
Got an energy spike. Launch.
In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launch. Get us out of here. Return fire. Well, freeze them.
Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover pieces of software that I have found particularly useful, or perhaps that I find to be, absolute garbage. Though usually I don't talk about those just because, I don't use software that's not very good. Maybe if someone asks me, hey, could you give me a review? What do you think of this? Then perhaps I'll come out and say, and I'll talk a little bit more about a piece of software that was terrible. The only piece, I've said this before, but the only piece of software I ever gave a bad review for so far was iTunes 11, because it was that much of a mess since they got rid of CoverFlow. Anyway, this week, and I've done this before, this week's a little different. This is a piece of software not that's out there for you to get or to download, but that's up and coming. And I have done this in the past, where I will talk about a piece of software to keep a lookout for. And I want to talk about this one right now because it's very, very exciting, because you can get in on on paying for this and getting getting to use it. And what it is, it's called Heml.is, or perhaps it's Heml.i. I haven't gotten the exact pronunciation, and that's Swedish for secrecy. And it's a piece of software that it's being made by one of the co-creators of the Pirate Bay. And you can fund, it's like $5 to fund into it. And I totally recommend doing that. I think their goal is only like 100,000. I know they've exceeded that already, but you can get in, for like $5 and you get a couple codes. What is this? It is a messaging program for iPhone and Android, at least for iOS and Android. And it is supposedly, now again, I talked about quantum computers earlier, and I don't know that they'd stand up to that, but it's supposedly, it is just totally secure, and it's really, really beautifully designed. You can go to Heml.is, and that will actually take you to the website so that you can check it out and take a look at it. And as far as the beauty of it, it is beautiful. As far as the function, well, only time is going to tell. But it's being made by the right people. No doubt about that, by the absolute right people. And it looks like when it does come out, it'll actually be free, though I'm sure there'll be some kind of premium version when it comes out there. As far as the types of encryption it's using, that hasn't been totally discussed yet. But again, it's being made by the right people. So this is very, very, very exciting to look into, and well worth backing in my opinion, if you're looking for some degree of secrecy. I mean, at what level of secrecy are we talking about? Oh, real quick, they do accept Bitcoins. They have a Bitcoin wallet for you. If you want to get your code via Bitcoin, you can do that. So kudos to them for that as well, because Pirate Bay recently just added that onto their page, where they're allowing for Bitcoin and Litecoin donations. So anyway, what this is that, say you have Verizon, say you have AT&T, you use this software, it doesn't matter what they track. It's going to be totally encrypted. It's just going to look like a garbled mess to them, and they're not going to know where it's going, where it's coming from. This is open source. I probably wouldn't recommend a secure messaging program if it wasn't open source. That's why I don't recommend iMessage by Apple. But anyway, check it out. Heml.is. This is really, really exciting. I mean, and they're easily 100,000 to develop an app. In the app world, that's actually kind of small potatoes. But they're achieving it easily, really, really easily. Like I said, they've already made their money to do it. But if you want to give them more, rock and roll, go for it. And I think, when you take into consideration like WhatsApp, like supposedly WhatsApp is secure, but they're going to get bought out by some big company that's probably not secure. This is going to stay, again, with the right people. Pirate Bay, we love the Pirate Bay on Sovryn Tech. So check it out. It's Heml.is. Very exciting.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk, and I love that intro, and I love the music too. The music is by BitShifter. It's from the album Information Chase, and I believe the song is called Hexadecimal Genome. And if like all those words coming out at once just excite you, I recommend listening to more of his stuff, because it's that good. All made on a Game Boy. But anyway, this week I don't have an actual game story that I want to go into. It seems like pretty much all the game stories right now are talking about Xbox One versus PlayStation 4, which, if you're wondering, in my opinion, the PlayStation 4 is winning this one easy. I think Sony is Sony's going to end up taking over the world again. Maybe one last time, but they're definitely going to be back to their PlayStation 2 days, where they were just the dominant force in video gaming, outside of course, the PC and really Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't compete, and that doesn't mean a lot of the stories too are all about how Nintendo, they're flopping, this is blah blah blah. No, Nintendo's not flopping. They've been around for 120 years. They'll be around for another 120 years, and they won't pull a Sega to do it. Whoops. And had a little mic problem there. And so Nintendo just doesn't bother. They pretend the opposition doesn't exist. So I don't count Nintendo. People say it's a three-way, battle between who sells, who has the best console. No, it's usually either more numbers than that, or it's just two. And in this case, it's between two. It's between Microsoft and Sony, and quite frankly, Sony's winning, in my opinion. If you actually want to know more about that, my opinions on that, you can ask me. But anyway, so that's the bulk of what people are talking about. But instead, I want to go back. Way back in the time. Yeah, if you know what that's from, you can send me an email too. But a listener actually asked me, they were appreciative of I did a listener email where asking how did I get into technology, and one of the reasons I got into technologies was video games, because I wanted to be able to play video games. And back in the day, outside of the NES, if you wanted to play a game, you had to do some figuring out. You had to learn some technology to be able to do it. And so I was talking about that, and the listener actually asked, and it was such a great request, I couldn't not do it. Was, would you talk about Doom? Because he said Doom was so quintessential to him. And I agree. Doom, if you don't know, Doom was, you probably do. There was a movie made about it a few years ago. The movie was terrible. It had The Rock in it, but whatever. It was Doom. Doom it came out in like 1993, and it's kind of like the first-person shooter. And it's sort of a survival horror, so it kind of has, Resident Evil, it doesn't have zombies. It has demons and all this business. You're actually fighting through hell in the game, which oddly enough made it okay with my parents that I was fighting Satan. It didn't matter. Like, my mother never wanted me to have anything that looked like a gun, so I could play with phasers, and I could play Doom because I was actually shooting like demons, and so she thought that was okay. Whatever. How these people justify things. Anyway, Doom, again, one of the original first-person shooters. It was originally only for PC. At the time, 1993, PC was the only thing that could handle it. The first time I think that Doom actually left the PC, because, again, it's been ported on a million things, but the first time it left the PC, I want to say it was like 1994 or 95 when the Jaguar came out. They actually released a version of Doom for the Atari Jaguar, which was a system I actually liked. But anyway, it was weird. Actually, Doom for the Jaguar was weird because it didn't have any music, which made it kind of creepy. That definitely put the horror and survival horror. But just a quintessential game. It really is. And again, they've made a movie out of it. That's how big it was. There's 4 or 5 novels that came out years in the 90s, which were really, really good. And it's all about this space marines, literally fighting through hell. And though in some story, like in Doom 3, they're still making these things, and Doom 4 is one of these games that everybody's saying, when is this going to come out? But in Doom 3, they made it more you're on Mars and you access an alternate dimension. It's not actually hell. It's just the scientific other dimension. So, the story's changed a little bit here and there. But the original Doom, now the graphics look, they're not necessarily 8-bit, but they do look kind of rough. It's something that you can buy the original Doom on Steam. You can buy the whole set. In fact, the summer sale's going on right now at Steam, and boy, if you want to get some cheap games, rock and roll, you could spend $5 and I bet you'd walk away with 5 games easy. Great games too. So anyway, Doom was the first-person shooter aspect was just so shocking in 1993 because, like, it was literally you, like, looking around now, you know. And I don't really care for first-person shooters so much anymore, or at least I don't like the hyper-realistic military ones. Doom is not that. Doom is, you know, over the top, and not over the top like Duke Nukem, but Doom is you know, over the top and totally fantastical, and you can realize that. So I still enjoy Doom. In fact, I picked it up last year. They came out with they re-released Doom 3 to where, like, it worked with virtual headsets, like the now I can't think of the name of the headset, but you know, anyway, but with like VR glasses, it works with that, which is interesting. So, you know, these games are still totally playable. The only odd part is that Doom, you can't, in the first Doom, this changed, but in the first Doom you couldn't jump, which, not that jumping in first-person shooters way back when, or even now maybe, was that big a deal. It was a big deal if you played like Jedi Knight, if you played the Star Wars first-person shooters, which those I love too, but that is kind of strange when you're, like, used to jumping to maybe to, like, dodge bullets or something, or to get away from a creature fast. You couldn't do that. So you're going to feel a little bit of the antiquatedness if you do decide to play the original Doom again. But still, it's still a totally fun game. And you can't say enough just how important it was. I mean, and again, this has been released for everything. It's come out for Game Boy Advance. There was even a version called Doom 64, which they tried to, like, make it really like 3D like they tried to update the graphics quite a bit. And that was one of, like, the release games for the Nintendo 64. I mean, Doom was a big deal. And I still think it is, just, you know, there hasn't been a new one in a long time. So, I mean, really check it out. There were other games. Lots of games came out that were like Doom way back. There was Heretic, which is an awesome game. That's more of like that's like you're a wizard and you're shooting a staff instead of a gun, and that's a really, really cool game. But that's a lot like Doom. There's another one which is actually getting a remake right now that was like Doom. It was the perfection of Doom. It's like they took all the ideas from Doom and all these, like, first-person shooters way back when, and they put it all into one. It's called Rise of the Triad, and that's the real jewel, because you can still play that to this day and have a good time. In fact, Rise of the Triad, along with, like, Doom 2 and all that, again, we're talking 1993, 1994, 95. People were playing over phone lines, over landlines. They were doing multiplayer death matches. Well, I thought we do death matches with Halo. No, actually 15 years before then, or 10 years before then, people were doing it. And again, they were doing it, you know, they didn't have to buy any special equipment. They did it over phone line, and it worked great. Doom worked great playing that way. Another, you know, real quick, another great one that I had was Blake Stone, Aliens of Gold. That there was a couple of Blake Stone games, but those were good too. Wolfenstein 3D was the real first person shooter, but that and there's a new Wolfenstein game coming out that actually I think looks pretty wild, where the Nazis didn't lose World War II. But Doom was the one. That's where everybody was like, whoa, this is intense. So check it out if you haven't. It's worth a look at. I'll be right back with
more. Are you searching for a mouth-watering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find Georgia's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, Georgia's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for Georgia's famous baklava. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where I cover various stories that have to do with security or with the real heroes of the planet Earth, hackers, or at least they're the heroes in our digital world. Be they white hat, gray hat, black hat, I think they're all heroes. I love them. And this story is from RT.com. And again, I mentioned this earlier in the show, and I said that I would not talk about PRISM again. I said that last week, actually, on the show, and I said earlier in this show that, we're going to do another PRISM story. So here goes. And, why am I doing this? Because I think it's such an important point to make that I'm really not hearing from anybody else. Which is the reason, that's actually part of the reason I do the entire show, Sovryn Tech, is that I feel like my opinions are not voiced. With the things like, there's a lot of great technology shows out there, but most of them just end up saying, and that's why we need government funding, or we need the FBI to do this or that. I don't agree with any of that. So, but there's nobody out there, there's no tech journalists out there saying that, no, how about we just don't have government and we let this, technology thing run amok and see where it goes. Nobody's saying that. Anyway, so this is from, again, RT.com, and just a very, very important point that nobody's really talking about. And it's bugged by U.S. spying, EU may sever ties with American internet providers. This is from July 5th, 2013. EU businesses are threatening to terminate relations with American internet providers in response to the National Security Agency surveillance scandal, the European Commission has warned. And of course, they're talking about PRISM, which is, if you don't know what PRISM is essentially this NSA program where they are monitoring all internet communications, and they essentially have said they have backdoors to all the companies, be it Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, go down the list, just hundreds of companies that they have backdoors to their servers to, and that the companies are aware of it and allowed for it. The only exception, or the only big name exception, apparently being Twitter. So, which kudos to Twitter on that. Let's see. Neelie Kroes, Vice President of the European Commission, said that U.S. providers of cloud services, a technology that permits clients to store data on remote servers, could suffer steep losses if users fear the security of their material is at risk of being compromised. If businesses or governments think that they might be spied on, they will have less reason to trust cloud, and it will be cloud providers who ultimately miss out, Kroes said. Why would you pay someone else to hold your commercial or other secrets if you suspect or know they are being shared against your wishes? The EC vice president then pointed to the multi-billion euro consequences facing U.S. internet companies in the wake of the scandal. And this is true. Actually, Stephanie Murphy on Pork Therapy just recently he did a story about how Microsoft is just, they don't care. They're not even they're not standing up for your quote-unquote privacy rights at all. They're just like, no, here, this is the information. Go ahead, take a look. It's all yours. Go for it. To the NSA. The EU is not being outlandish in making this claim at all. It is often American providers that will miss out because they are often the leaders in cloud services. If European cloud customers cannot trust the United States government, then maybe they won't trust U.S. cloud providers either. If I am right, there are multi-billion euro consequences for American companies. If I were an American cloud provider, I would be quite frustrated with my government right now. On Thursday, the European Parliament overwhelmingly passed a non-binding resolution that says the U.S. should provide full disclosure about its email and communications data. Otherwise, two EU-U.S. transatlantic information sharing deals, the Terrorist Finance Tracking Program, and passenger name records could be revoked. Oh, that's nice that they were colluding together and sharing all of our information. Relations between Washington and Brussels suffered a setback in June when former NSA analyst Edward Snowden leaked details of a top-secret U.S. data mining surveillance program known as PRISM, which operated both in the United States and the European Union. PRISM is said to give the NSA and FBI user information from some of the world's largest internet companies, including Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Yahoo, and Skype. Bear in mind, Microsoft and Skype are the same company. Der Spiegel cited a secret 2010 document alleging that the U.S. spied on internal computer networks in Washington, as well as at the 27-member bloc's UN office and EU offices in New York. The NSA paper also allegedly refers to the EU as a target. According to Der Spiegel, the U.S. surveillance system spied on some 500 million telephone and internet recordings in Germany each month, ramping up fears that the United States was not simply collecting data to prevent against acts of terrorism, but was involved in full-scale industrial espionage. In response to heated European criticism of the U.S. surveillance activities, U.S. President Barack Obama this week seemed to downplay the severity of the situation when he commented, "I guarantee you that in European capitals there are people who are interested in, if not what I had for breakfast, at least what my talking points might be should I end up meeting with their leaders. That's how intelligence services operate." Okay. During a Wednesday phone conversation with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Obama sought to reassure her that the United States would provide the Europeans with details of their surveillance program. Meanwhile, in an effort to contain the damage from the revelations, ambassadors to the European Union agreed on Thursday to proceed with EU-US negotiations on a new transatlantic free trade pact scheduled to open in Washington on Monday. Okay, all right, look, I know we're messing up. I know, we're spying on you. We're supposed to be buddies, but here, we'll give you a concession. We'll give you a little trade deal, okay? Just please stop worrying about us. We're going to watch you, okay? There's nothing you can do about it. During the EU-US trade negotiations, it will certainly not go unnoticed that crucial European positions in the trade talks may already be compromised due to the wide-scale surveillance. EU officials do not want the issue of America's covert spy program to be the elephant in the room, which nobody talks about. Dalia Grybauskaitė, I hope I got that, the president of Lithuania, which takes over the rotating 6-month EU presidency this week, said on Thursday that she awaits information, not apologies, from the Americans over the spying allegations. They are open to cooperation. They are open to explain, she said. I never seek an apology from anyone. I seek information. We don't want to jeopardize the strategic importance of free trade. Grybauskaitė insisted that the scandal, which has shown no sign of abating, should not be allowed to obstruct the trade talks, but acknowledged that some countries are very sensitive on this question. Meanwhile, Britain may also have some explaining to do on the sidelines of next week's trade talks, since it was suggested that the UK's government communications headquarters, through a system known as Tempora, has had access to the US Internet monitoring program since at least June 2010. The Brits were in on it! The European Commission Vice President said that U.S. companies could suffer from the U.S. government's covert intelligence gathering activities. Concerns about cloud security can easily push European policymakers into putting security guarantees ahead of open markets, with consequences for American companies, Kroos warned. Cloud has a lot of potential, but potential doesn't count for much in an atmosphere of distrust. And that is very true. The part that this article didn't really get into, it's still very interesting, but is that Europeans in general, not just their government officials, are livid at PRISM. Why? Because the Americans are saying, the ones that are actually mad about it, even though it would appear that most Americans really don't care, they're like, okay, well, as long as I'm safe. But the Americans that are actually mad about it are saying, you can't do that to us. We have the right to privacy. And so the Europeans and pretty much any other nation out there is saying, well, what are we, chopped liver? This is the point that's not getting out in other tech shows. Stop talking. I mean, okay, it's important to talk about, do you have a right to your privacy and where your information goes and who looks at it? Yes, you do. Okay, or at least whatever rights mean, you have it. But when you're just talking about like, just for Americans, no, right? Okay, if this whole rights thing is true, then it applies to everybody, including the Europeans. They should be able to say, no, you can't watch me either. But nobody's talking about that. It's all just, the poor Americans. Anyway, I'll be back with more.
Oh, yeah.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovereign Tech Producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's PORC therapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. You know, Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I pretty much talk about anything. It could be a TV show, it could be a book, a movie, anything that tickles my fancy, I can essentially talk about. And I'm kind of doing a double duty here. I've been doing double duty on a lot of questions tonight, but this one was, I had a couple of people message me saying, "What's the deal with Power Rangers?" And you know, instead of doing that for a listener email, I was like, well, I'll do it as a pick of the week because I'd pick Power Rangers, and I do, and the reason again that it came up is because like on Facebook, I've often where Facebook would allow me to, I've done this on Google Plus too. I've posted pictures of Green Ranger and Pink Ranger fucking. I have actually on any social media I use, like, you know, you have like not your profile picture, but you essentially have like a cover photo. I think that's what they call it on Facebook. You know, or you have whatever, you have some kind of like big photo that when somebody goes to your profile page, be it even on Twitter, you know, that'll show. And right now, and actually for quite a few months, it has been a picture of Gold Ranger from Power Rangers Zeo with his Zord or ship behind him, Pyramidas, and which is a giant pyramid that can like morph into a robot or can fly him through the stars. It's actually really cool. And so I'm guessing that's where a lot of people like came up with the whole thing is, you know, like what's the deal with Power Rangers? And well, if you don't know what Power Rangers is, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe if you don't, but if you don't, and that's okay if you don't, actually kudos to you if you don't know what it is. That means you haven't been potentially corrupted by mainstream culture. Power Rangers was, I mean, they call it a kid's show, but it was a kid's show on Fox. It started on Fox anyway. Now it's owned by Disney, which is interesting. Disney pretty much owns everything I love. So whatever feelings I've had about Disney in the past, I have to trash them out the door because, again, quite frankly, they own it all. They own Tron, they own Star Wars, they own Power Rangers, they own Marvel Comics. I mean, that, you know, okay, so fortunately they don't own Babylon 5, Stargate, and Star Trek, but give them time, right? And then they'll just end up owning all of it. And anyway, so Power Rangers originally was on Fox, and what it was is that a guy named Heml.is, he took a show called Super Sentai from Japan, and he brought it to the United States, but all he did was he clipped out all the action sequences from Super Sentai, and he put in, you know, and he made a completely different show, and they are completely different shows, because over in Japan, the Japan version of Power Rangers Super Sentai is serious as a heart attack. I mean, it's high drama. You know, it's by no one considers it a kid show over there. As to here, that's definitely where it was marketed to. And it started in 1993, so I was about 12, I guess, when it started. You know, so I was like, I was one of like the prime kind of, you know, the prime age, that the prime demographic that they were targeting, and they definitely got me. And Power Rangers is, it's a totally American show. All they did again was use the action sequences from Japan, which often, and I didn't know that. I actually didn't realize that it was originally Japanese show back in '93, because there wasn't really, the internet existed, but it wasn't like the internet to where, I could, look, there wasn't a Wikipedia where I could look that up. But it was interesting because I could kind of tell, I remember, when I'd watch it way back then, I could tell when there was points, it's like, wait a minute, why are they using different cameras? Like, why is the camera quality differently? And I really did think about that when I was 12. And it, so I knew something was up, and like the idea that, that some of the characters, when they would talk, not like the villains, because the heroes, the actual Power Rangers in the show were all American actors, and whenever they were on, they were totally filmed American scenes, and so it was a very American show because of that, which is fine. But sometimes, like when the villains would talk, like their lips wouldn't match up, just like if you're watching a Bruce Lee movie or some old kung fu movie that was dubbed. And so I had an idea that, like, okay, yeah, they're getting this stuff from somewhere else, I think, because this doesn't make any sense. But I didn't care because it was just so cool. It was really, really cool. And, it got criticism back in the 90s. And you have to understand, like the whole Fox Kids thing, which is just a part of like society or of American culture now, television culture. Power Rangers like took that to the height. Ninja Turtles was there, and then that was a big deal, but nobody really got to capitalize on it because it's kind of syndicated. But when Power Rangers came out, it was a deal through Fox, and Fox was able to capitalize on it. And Fox ended up like because of Power Rangers, they just took over kids like Saturday mornings, and they even took over Sunday mornings because they ended up doing like, this is right around when Casey Kasem stopped doing his top 40 on Sundays. So he didn't really stop doing it, but that's when like his popularity was starting to diminish. And so they came in, Fox comes in and says, okay, we're going to do a Fox Kids top 40 essentially. And that was just the biggest thing out there, and that was my every Sunday morning was listening to the Fox Kids radio top 40 thing, and a lot of that had to do with Power Rangers, and they would like do previews for the next Power Rangers, or they'd have like guests on they'd have Jason Frank or whoever on, as like a guest host. And so you're just dying to hear it because there's more Power Rangers. So they took over the world, or they took over America for quite some time, all with just one show, with a half-hour show, amazingly, that they paid. The budget for the show was practically nil because they would still have to film sometimes, because sometimes the American actors would take their helmets off when they were Power Rangers, and so those were obviously filmed here, and they'd have to do some effects shots for that. But by and large, they had to do very, very few effects shots because they were just using rehashed, recycled footage from Super Sentai in Japan. So it was a genius way to make a show. It was perfect. So if whether you like Power Rangers or not, you got to give Haim Saban credit for just an idea that he went to the bank with, because it was almost like 80% pure profit, which is unheard of in television. So that's what Power Rangers is. That's kind of a history and a couple good reasons of why to dig it. But why did Brian Sovryn really like it? Why does Brian Sovryn still like it and still watch it? First off, I'll go with the caveat that I don't actually still watch it. After SPD, I think it was like season 15. I think that's what SPD was. After Power Rangers SPD, which was a great season. There's to my mind there is a few great, because Power Rangers, like, it had new iterations every year or a couple of years, and which has to do with the Japanese show style that, so they were like forced to do that almost. But there's years that were better than others, and like the first 2-3 years were really, really great. Actually, the first 4 years were really great, where they had, by and large, a lot of the same cast was there, or at least the cast went for a long time, and there was a continuing storyline. So from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which was like the first 3 years, and then Power Rangers Zeo, those are like the classics, and they're still great. After that was, Turbo and Space. Turbo and Space were a little rough. I started to not really like either of those. But then there was Power Rangers Galaxy, which got worse. But then they did what was called Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. That was awesome. That was like a totally new, that wasn't even on Earth. That was in a totally different area. And that was great. That was good. Then they ended up doing the next good season. This was years later, was Dino Thunder. And that was great because they brought back the original Green Ranger. They brought Jason David Frank on, who was just a classy guy. And after that, the show kind of waned again for a while, got really, really terrible and cheap. But then they had a season called Power Rangers SPD, and that was like the last hurrah, I think, for Power Rangers, unless someone does something really interesting in the near future. But that was Power Rangers SPD was great. Again, that was like Lost Galaxy, where it was taking place nowhere near Earth, and it was just way out there in space, and it was good stuff. So anyway, okay, now what did I like about the show? I think the idea that, why does any child like, superheroes? Maybe it's because as a child, we're all kind of, or not all, but most of us are in oppressive relationships via our parents or bullies at school or somewhere. And so the idea that you could, kind of press your watch, which I actually wear when I wear a calculator watch, but I've had the Power Ranger communicator watch before. You could wear a watch essentially, and then you could kind of beam somewhere, and then you had like this little thing you could pull out, this morpher, and you could just say it's morphin time, and then suddenly you were unstoppable. And you could take on any evil that came your way. That's very, very attractive to any child. Boy or girl, that's a very, very attractive thing, no doubt about it. So that was exciting. But then I think what really hooked me was they did this story. They did a 5-episode story arc in the first season called Green with Evil, where they introduced the Green Ranger, who is probably the most recognizable Power Ranger of the bunch. And actually, Jason David Frank, the actor who's played it, he's in the present season that's out right now for Power Rangers Megaforce. He's all over the place. He's also probably the most recognizable Power Ranger, actor, even though he hasn't done much outside of it other than something for like MTV. And in that, it's all about him. He's this nice guy, but he gets essentially controlled by the main villainess of the show, Rita Repulsa, and he becomes the evil Green Ranger. She makes him her Power Ranger. And I liked that because it spoke to me, I think, at that age, 12, 13, 14, to where I was really already starting to go through realizing that this whole, like, that being a good person, or, by being a conservatively good person, I'll say, in quotes, was not the key to happiness. And so, like, this whole, like, evil aspect was really dramatic and cool, even for someone that young. And so the Green Ranger is the key to a lot of it, and that really, really hooked me. And then, of course, he ends up becoming a good guy. He breaks Rita Repulsa's spell, and he's like the most powerful Power Ranger, because he has, partly because he has these evil powers in him. And it's just, fascinating, really deep stuff. That's why I put it as a kid's show in quotes, because there's a lot about it that's pretty grown up, and at least I think grown-ups can still enjoy. And maybe, this is something I'll save for future Sovryn Tech, but something I've never understood is how you can like something as a, especially as like a tween, maybe like, I understand why you wouldn't like something that you liked when you were 4, but like when you were 13, 14, 15, you like something and now you don't like it at all. Other than going through some kind of massive philosophical change in your mind, I can't picture why people don't like it. And I don't see that many people going through philosophical changes. Anyway, I'll be back with more next week. This is Sovryn Tech, and I'm Brian Sovryn. See you later.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.